I live in Cambridge Park. Across from Publix. Not sure if you kind of does. Yeah. This
Everyone, if you can go ahead and take a seat, we're going to get started with tonight's education session. If you want to go ahead and grab a seat, we have a great event planned for you this evening. Hopefully you've had some time to take a look at some of the posters and the output for the comprehensive plan update, which is the main planning process that we're working under this evening and have for the past several months. If you didn't get time to finish the activities, you will have time after the education session to finish that. Please make sure you put your email address and name on the back of that sheet, because we're going to draw for a $25 gift card to Linux Cupcakes. And we don't accept incomplete work, so you got to make sure you fill everything out or you get disqualified. So do all of your homework and you might just win that $25. Welcome everyone, I'm Matt Dickinson with the City of Chamblee Planning and Development Department. I did want to point out we have several elected officials here tonight. We have Councilman John Mesa. We have Councilmember Brian Mock, Councilmember Leslie Robson, and Councilmember Tom Hogan, and Councilmember Darren Cussman. I think I got everybody. John was first. No particular order of preference. So like I said, we have some great speakers here tonight to talk to you about affordable housing, which is a very hot topic, we will say, not only here in Chamblee, but throughout the country. We have representatives from our market consultant, Jonathon Gelber, is going to speak to you this evening. And then we also have some special guests from Mercy Housing and also the Atlanta Land Trust. And they'll introduce themselves and tell you about their programs. And maybe we can see if there's some things that they can teach us that we can replicate or use here in the city. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our lead consultant, TSW, and Adam's going to give you just kind of an update about where we are in the process and next steps.
Thanks, Matt. Well, thank you all for coming out today. I'm Adam Williamson with TSW. Again, this is our team that you see here working for the City of Chamblee, TSW. We're looking at land use and design, and Kimberly Horn's looking at transportation. Bleakly Advisory was helping us out with housing and economic development. And then Urban 3 gave a presentation you may have seen at St. Pius. And then we have South Face that's looking at sustainability. So if you have been to the comprehensive plan meeting, you kind of know what it's about. It's kind of straightforward. There it is, the comprehensive plan. But it's a roadmap that outlines how the city's vision will be for the next 5 to 10 years. And you update this every 5 years. So we're looking out, so when you see these plans and you see these policies, we're thinking 20 years out. So how will the plan work? So what we have is a vision statement, and then we have the goals, and then we develop policies. If you're over here, you see those policies, and then we have specific projects, which you should have received a list of. And that's really a comprehensive list, and we're still building that list with the city, but we're trying to take all the other plans and all the other projects and put them in one area. So this is the process. Again, this is our last public meeting. So we started out with the research and analysis back in March, and we've been working rather quickly to come up with the visioning and what happened in May and June. And today we're here with the draft plan. And then we'll have the final plan in September, October. And there will be, I think this is the next slide. Yeah, so August 27th, we hope to be posting the draft document. And we'll have software where you can actually comment on the draft document and give us feedback for the next month or so. So I'm going to turn it over quickly and start talking about housing with Jonathan.
Thanks. Thanks, Adam. I got a big voice. I'm going to put this down.
Oh, will you use the microphone for the video?
Please. Okay. So my name is Jonathon Gelber with Bleakly Advisory Group. I'm here to talk about economic development and housing. First, I'm going to start with the economic development part. And economic development is a word we throw around a lot. Not a lot of people are clear on what that means. So I'm going to give you a good little definition here. Economic development is the policies, programs, and activities that seek to enhance the quality of life of the community by encouraging economic activity, expand and retain employment, and support a sustainable and stable tax base to fund public investment and government activity. A lot of words there, but how do we use that? The old school way that we're used to doing economic development is all about recruitment of companies and industrial base and giving people incentives and jobs. Over the years, it's turned into more of a holistic thing, that we've come to realize that a city, a community, and is a complex organism, that there's all these parts moving around. And the way I like to look at economic development is that economic development is like healthcare, to make sure that all the different parts of the system are working well together. So while we still have jobs, services, productions, logistics, there's all this other stuff that has to work to make that work. Too many, don't have enough hands here. So what we have is public infrastructure, public services, commerce, entertainment, quality of life, housing and development. And then in the middle of all of that, what we have is transit and transportation, and money, taxes, and public revenues. I like to think about this as the circulation system, and this is the blood. That the transportation is the way that the workers get to the jobs, that the policemen get to the fires, or the firemen get to the fires, that the productions get to the stores, and money is the way that you encourage people and goods to move back and forth across this. So economic development is making sure that all parts of this, not just the jobs and the industry are done, but that housing is working, that commerce is working, that entertainment, quality of life, that you have a community where people not only do come work, but where they want to come work, where they want to live, where employers want to be, where employers want to find their employees, and where there's enough money going around to pay for the public services and the public infrastructure. First thing I want to say is that you've already got in Chamblee an excellent head start. That I do a lot of these plans, and I don't know of any other place I work in where you've already got a heavy rail transit station right in the middle of your town. Every other town I'm looking at says, oh, we need to spend $30 billion to maybe get a streetcar coming out here in 2096. You guys have that here already. That is literally worth billions of dollars. The fact that you have this right here that's connected to Buckhead, connected to downtown, connected to Midtown, connected to the airport, that is an asset you have here worth zillions and zillions of dollars. That it's just, I can't even start with how much this is a excellent thing to have right in the middle of your town, that you're already well ahead of the game there. So one thing we like to do when we look at economic development is what I call economic geography. I just came up with this term a few days ago. What I do is I take a lot of big data from real estate sources, from planning sources, and I mash it all up using GIS systems to say it's enough to talk about things, but it's hard to get a concept about what it looks like. So what I've done here is I've taken every building in this whole part of the city or the region, and I've plotted out every building, and I used a lot of different engineering ratios and planning ratios to make an estimate of how many people work in each of these buildings. And when we do this, we can begin to see patterns. So one pattern we see is there's a lot of big buildings in Buckhead. There's a lot of big buildings in the perimeter. There's a lot of big buildings out here where the county courthouse and jail is. And what do we have up here in Chamblee? We don't have 10 buildings with 1,000 people in them. We have 1,000 buildings with 10 people. We've got this real sprawly, and this is kind of a hallmark of an industrial manufacturing sort of layout. You see a lot of buildings where there's just a handful of people working there. And so this has a lot of impacts about how the city operates, particularly in terms of transportation and housing. How do you connect people to their jobs and so on? So one of the questions is we're able to answer through this is where are Chamblee's jobs? How can we link the jobs to the homes, and how can we link the services? How do we make sure that we're doing what we're doing now so 25 years we have the access to the jobs and the housing and the transit that we want? Because that's the framework we're looking at here. We can also look at this in terms of different land uses. These red dots here are all retail buildings based on how big the square footage is. Again, we've got Lennox and Fit Mall down here, we've got Perimeter Mall down here, we've got a whole bunch of kind of big box retail stuff here on Memorial Drive. And what do we have up here? Do we have a laser here? What do we have here? We have a big sprawling corridor of kind of medium small buildings here. That just shows there's a different shape of the retail that you have in Chamblee. You look at offices, you see a different pattern here. You see again, perimeter is going crazy. Buckhead would be a lot crazier, but I only did the DeKalb County buildings in this map. You see we got a lot of little tiny offices here. We got a big cluster down here. We got a cluster here with CDC. But there's not really a lot in the downtown area in terms of office buildings for people. So how does that work in? This is industrial and flex buildings. Wow, you guys got it going on industrial and flex buildings. But if anybody's been reading the Wall Street Journal the last 40 years, that industrial and flex is not really the wave of the future of the economy. So this is going to transition over into other uses. So the question is, how do we either convert those buildings, how do we change those buildings into something else, or how do we maintain those industrial jobs in those industrial buildings? This is another one. This is all multifamily buildings or apartments. And I know that we heard a lot of people, why do we have to have more than our fair share of apartments here in Chamblee? And one thing I want to show you is that you got about an exactly perfect fair share of apartments here. You have not really more or less than any of the communities surrounding you. But you're really in balance there. They're all kind of clustered on Buford Highway and Peachtree here, the freeway. No, it's Peachtree. So you got these certain clusters, but it's a pretty reasonable distribution there. This is one place where I think you really shine. This is buildings that are planned and proposed based out of the CoStar retail database. And if you look at planned and proposed buildings based on square footage, Chamblee here, this little thing, roughly half of everything on this entire map here is happening in downtown Chamblee or in Dorville right now. That is really remarkable and incredible how hot this region is, or this city is for redevelopment right now. That's something to be proud of and something to work with, but also something we're going to need to manage as growth goes on. So a comp plan is a very high level thing. We don't go in and do the nitty gritty too detailed. You're fortunate enough that you did 2 years ago the Strategic Economic Development Plan for the city of Chamblee, Georgia. So we reviewed that to make sure all of the goals and concepts in that are still valid, and to make sure that anything we did in this plan supports and does not go against the recommendations of this. Some pretty good high-level principles that were unified vision and strategy, build on your existing assets such as that great industrial base, the great job base, and your transit and transportation, and to preserve and enhance the diversity and unique characteristics of Chamblee. The big goals that were articulated in that were create a place where people feel comfortable leaving their offices. These are not mine, these are your community goals that came out of this. Create a lifelong community, enhance live, work, play downtown, and create a sense of place. To diversify the mix of businesses. Again, we were saying earlier how much of this is in industrial and manufacturing. We'd like to see a larger mix so that you're not all dependent on a single industry. Identify resources to advance new and existing businesses. That's traditional economic development right there. Attract higher paying jobs. Create opportunities for existing residents. And another thing they did in this plan is they did opportunity area analysis, right? They identified 8 particular small areas that this is where your opportunities are. And by great coincidence, 7 of those 8 are the ones we picked for small area plans in this plan. The 8th one is Century Center, which has some other work going on there. So this plan is a very good plan. I don't normally say it was done by a different consulting firm, but I will still endorse it. It's a good plan. And so we have adopted this into this to make sure that none of these recommendations we're making go counter to what you did 2 years ago. So how does that all work into this planning process? We are making sure that nothing in this process goes against that, and that all of those ideas are supported and brought through here to make sure that the new comprehensive plan supports the work you've already done in that strategic plan. I want to transition here into housing trends, because one thing, as we've heard a lot, not just in this community, but in every community, it's this isn't like it used to be here in Chamblee. When I grew up here, it was different. Why are we building all these apartments now? Everywhere I look, it's apartments, apartments, apartments. Why does that have to be going on here? Why can't it be like it used to be? And I'm going to tell you why, because there's some big major national and global trends that are going on. The most important trend that's going on everywhere is people are living longer. Medical health is better, general health is better, medical care, people are healthier, people are more active. Atlanta Regional Commission estimates that this year 13% of the regional population is over 65. By 2040, they anticipate that 19% of the population will be above 65. Not only that, but older people tend to be more active these days. So there's different things going on than there used to be. If you look at U.S. life expectancy since 1960, it's gone from roughly 69 years to 80 years. So that's a huge shift in the demographics, people living longer, people having different housing preferences. If we look at the age people start households, one thing they talk about in real estate, especially in single family and home production, is that you need to hit them first. You need to sell them their first house when they're 21 years old and they're out of college. You sell them a house, and then they get married, you sell them another bigger house, and they have kids, you sell them another bigger house. And so one of the things I've heard complaining from the housing industry is by the time people are 28, you used to have been able to sell them 3 houses. By the time they're 28 today, people aren't getting married the way they used to. People used to get married at women, this is 1978, women at 22, 23, and men at 25. Now it's gone up 5 or 10 years to the point that people are getting married for the first time. Same thing with babies. It used to be in 1970, the average age of a woman at first birth was 21.5. 2014, which is the most recent data I could find, is 26, and I'm sure it's a couple years older than that now. People are living a lot longer. Another urbanist I've seen likens it a lot to television. That back in the 60s and 70s, we watched Leave It to Beaver and the Brady Bunch, all these shows about suburban families with lots of kids. In the 90s, everyone was watching Friends and Seinfeld, which are all these childless singles who live in cities and apartments and condos. That just shows a big shift in the way people think about how we live our lives, how we live in cities. So this is a big shift. You've got a lot more people who are unmarried and childless living on their own. Another thing is we're going to smaller households. In the year 2000, the average in the Atlanta metro region was 2.5 persons a household. In 2018, it's 2.2 people a household. Again, this is more old people living longer. This is more single young people. This is more people who are just choosing to live in smaller households with fewer children. I did the math here that if you just take the number of people that are in the Atlanta metro region, if you put a gate around it, did not let any people come in to the Atlanta metro region, you didn't let anybody die. If you just shifted everybody from 2.5 people a house to 2.2 people per house, that represents demand for almost 400,000 new households just from this shift in the household size of people looking. So the question is, have we built 400,000 new houses in the Atlanta metro area in the last couple of years? No, we haven't. That's one of the reasons housing costs are going up and affordability is going down. People want smaller houses. A little bit of economic wonkery here, but it's pretty simple. Home prices are going up. Wages are flat. Access to mortgages is going down. That it used to be in 2007, anybody could walk into a bank, and if your eyes were even slightly open, they'd say, "Here, have $600,000, please." And we saw where that got us. That got us into trouble. So this is a chart. You can't see the numbers here, but credit availability. This is the boom right before the crash. They said, "Let's give everybody we can a mortgage." And they're like, "Oh, we made a mistake. Let's not give anybody a mortgage now." This is wages after inflation. We're still making the same money we were making in about 1960. Home prices, I don't need to tell you about home prices. They're going up, up, up. So it's very hard for people to buy houses these days. Renting is very popular these days. This, again, is the peak of the recession right here. You had a lot of home ownership around 2008 because they were throwing mortgages out like candy. And then since then, we've gone to the highest proportion of ownership since 1965. So a lot of renters right now. More and more people are renting, fewer people are owning. If this trend goes in the same way, a lot more renters. It might turn around at some point. And I'm not going to get too long, but this is when they invented mortgage flipping and consolidated mortgage things and real estate investment trusts, and the bankers took over the housing business. That's when they went crazy, right here. Transportation, we have started to realize that transportation is a huge part of housing costs, that being stuck in traffic costs money. This is some research that shows for households, especially in the lower income ranges, that they are paying more in transportation costs than they are paying for housing costs in most families. And it used to be that let's go, keep going farther out, let's go to Newnan, let's go to Brazelton, let's go to the next county out there, sell them cheap houses and cheap land. With congestion and gas costs and car costs, it's costing people more. So people want to now be in town. People want to be close to transit. People are recognizing that living near a transit station is actually worth almost as much as the rent that there. That is something people have internalized and people have recognized. Which one is this? Housing supply shortage. Used to be a lot of people were building houses, a lot of professional home builders that were grinding and crunching them. There were new houses, new houses, new houses. All of those people got nailed in 2008 and all the finance dried up. We are only building now roughly half of the houses that was normal before the crash. The crash was a little bit crazy, but before then we were up there. Now we're only down here. We just have not come back to start building even regular housing, whether it's fancy housing, middle class housing, or affordable housing. They're just not building enough. And we know from the law of supply and demand that if you're not building enough in the middle and the high end, in the middle and the high end people are going to push into the low end, and the low end people are getting pushed out with that. Preferences are changing. Like I told you about Seinfeld and the Brady Bunch, it used to be everybody wanted one of these. Now more and more and more people are starting to recognize that walkable urban communities are really nice places to live. And these walkable urban communities, especially in Atlanta, that's where most of the development has been in the last few years. They've really kind of stopped the suburban sprawl, and where you're seeing is all this kind of stuff we got going around here. That is where all of the development energy and action has been, not just in Chamblee, but all over the region. People are wanting this kind of urban development. So what does this mean? What are our big takeaways from all this? That it's not just you, it's everybody. There is less demand for large single-family owner-occupied houses for all those reasons I just told you. Fewer kids, fewer owners, less money going around. More households without children. More small households, just one or two people. Do they need a 4-bedroom, 3,000 square foot house, or do they need an 800-foot condo? More demand for rental homes. Renting is going up, and that's both both apartments and single-family houses in the rental pool. There's more interest in towns, mixed-use areas, and urban walkable environments, and there's more demand for affordable and workforce housing. So what does that turn into when we talk about housing, what we're looking for, and what we're building? I'm sorry about the lag here. I hope we can read this. This new model housing demand can be met with a variety of housing types. We're not saying throw away the single-family suburban home. That is still the #1 most popular kind of home in the world or in the United States. People are still going to want that. Whether that's appropriate for a context like this, probably not as much as it used to be. But there's still going to be a little bit of demand for that, but not nearly as much as there used to be. What we're looking at is demand for smaller homes, for loft apartments, for duplexes and triplexes. You might have heard the term missing middle. That's these kind of smaller forms between an apartment and a house that they just stopped building because zoning outlawed. Those are really coming back. Cottage homes, homes for seniors, homes for 20-somethings, small town homes, single-family suburban homes, urban apartments, condominiums, affordable housing, and roommate housing. The way our economy has gone the last 30 or 40 years, all of the energy, all of the zoning, all of the financing, all of the building has been just in this category here. That's left all this pent-up demand for all of this stuff. And then when you add these demographic changes, you're going to see a much broader demand that goes well beyond what used to be just a single-family market. And at this point, we're going to turn it over to Ronit, and she is going to tell us about how we start putting some of that kind of housing on the ground. Thanks.
So my name is Ronit Hoffer, and I'm with Mercy Housing Southeast, and we are a national nonprofit that focuses on development of affordable housing. Actually, right next door is one of our projects, and if you've seen down the street as well, is one at Mercy Park is one of our projects, our newest project that we brought online. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and put that in the context of how you bring about one of the missing elements in housing, which is affordable housing. And as you're planning, what are the incentives that municipalities and cities can bring to bear to help make these things happen? So I'm coming to you from the developer's perspective of what makes us go certain places and where do we build and why do we build there. But so that's senior residence at Mercy Park, right here in Chamblee down the street. It is award-winning project because it is one of the first examples of integration of health and housing. So So it is co-located with Mercy Care, which is a full-service health facility. Provides everything from dental and vision and behavioral health. I mean, it's the full gamut from cradle to grave. You can have all those services. So it's located on the same campus, right across the driveway as our senior building, which is for folks 62 and older. So the idea is it provides not only services for our residents to help keep them healthy and thriving in their senior years, but also is an asset for the community as well, because it is available to all in the community. And we also, in terms of the services, and it also provides health education programming, so healthy eating and cooking classes, so it provides a full gamut of services to our residents. So a little bit more about the project. It is 79 units of 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. For seniors, there's about 10% was set aside for veterans. It's 100% affordable building. And did I turn on? Oh, okay. I'm trying to press the button. So, and we also have a demonstration kitchen, a fitness room, computer center, and rooftop porch. So it's a beautiful, beautiful building. We're really proud of it, and our residents love it. So the question is, well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the site in terms of how do developers like us identify areas where we can build a project like that, and so what are the incentives? This particular site, it was a former brownfield, so it was a GE manufacturing site that they cleaned up, and let me step back for a second. Building affordable housing is the low-income housing tax credit program. That's a federal program that the federal government allocates tax credits to the states. The states then disperse them amongst, within a competitive process. So within that competitive process, they design sort of what the application process is, and they define what things that they want that score well. And so developers go where things score. So the state defines this is where we want things, and they allocate points. Is it your transportation? Is it, are you preserving affordable housing? Are you various categories? And so because it's such a competitive process, the developers will go wherever those points are. And so one of the points is, remediating a brownfield area, being near transportation, which it is, right by your jewel, as we explained, and it's walking distance to stores and various amenities. So that made that site, that location, great location for us to identify and put in an application in that competitive process. So I'm going to sort of skip it's a green building. We have it's LEED Gold. We have solar panels on the roof. So we did our best to make it as green as possible with the low VOC paints and sealants and recycled content and all of these things. And these are also various ways that when municipalities or funders put out ways to finance these projects, they also set their priorities, and they put these kinds of priorities like it being green. And so that incentivizes builders to do these things. So I mean, it's all about incentives in this kind of work. So I wanted to talk a little bit just about how the tax credit program works, and try to, because it really explains how a Chamblee can help encourage more of it to come to this area. So when you're trying to build a project, you first have to find the location. So you have to check to see how the state says where do they want things to be built. So that's sort of your first step, is identifying a location that's going to help you get your tax credits. And then, so the tax credits works as, if you're to buy a house, as you're just to buy your single family home, you need to come with a down payment, right? So you have to have some kind of equity that you can purchase the home. And then the rest of it you have to finance with a mortgage. And how much of a mortgage you can get, barring 2008, is dependent on how much income you have, right? So they look and see how much debt can you actually support, how much can you pay for your mortgage monthly. So it's the same in the commercial context, in commercial real estate. We have to come up with a down payment, and we have to have a certain amount of equity, and then we have to be able to support the remaining amount with a mortgage, and we have to be able to pay that back. And we pay that back through our rental income, right? So the rents that we gather pays back the mortgage. Well, we're in the business of doing affordable housing. So we're not trying to maximize the amount of rent that we charge. We're trying to get the rents as low as possible so that we can serve those most in need. So that's where the tax credit program comes in, because in a straight market context, it just doesn't work, right? We're trying to get our rents as low as possible, but then we don't have enough money to pay for the building of the building, because the construction costs don't change whether or not it's a market rate building or if it's an affordable building. So we have to come up with ways to fill that differential between the equity that the tax credits provide and the gap between how much rent we get in. So the real game here, so if you see here, financing a project, if a project is, say $15 million, that's $10 million is just your straight building costs of materials and your contractor and getting the site ready and bringing in the infrastructure and all of that. Then the soft costs are all, your lawyers and your permits and your furniture and all of those kinds of things. And then of course the land as well. So if you have your, say, what is that, around $15, $16 million, so how do you finance that? So most of that comes from these tax credits. So when the state awards a developer the tax credits, we turn that around and we can sell them to investors, and they give us the cash. So that's our equity. And then you have this gap. So that produces, a certain percentage. It's not going to cover the full cost of the building, but it does cover a nice chunk. But you end up with a gap, and you have to somehow find a way to fill that. And like I said before, we have very limited ability to pay back loans, because we try to keep our rents low. So we go for different sources. DCA is the Department of Community Affairs. HOME is a national federal program that's also administered by the state, that provide low income or low interest debt. So in this particular project, we had to layer at least 3 other layers of financing in order to be able to make the project work. So we got $2 million from the state, we got $250,000 from DeKalb County, and we got AHB, which is the Federal Home Loan Bank. So that's another $500,000 to fill our gap, as well as, despite being in a nonprofit, we still need to get paid. So that's our developer fee. And we had what was called deferring that fee, which is basically, we hope that we'll get paid back over time, but it really is money that is part of our fee that is funneled into the project. So that is another source that we're basically not paying ourselves in order to cover the cost of the project. So that's just sort of a 101 on how it works. And then the question becomes, premiums. So if you want something like green building or any of these premium ads, these just add to the cost. And whenever you add to the cost, we're going to have to find a way to get a source for that in order to cover that cost. So doing something like green building just the certification itself can be $60,000. The materials adds another $150,000 to $200,000. That's Energy Star appliances and, you know, efficient HVAC systems and all of these things, while they can provide savings over the long term for the building and operating the building, they are a significant investment at the front end, and that you have to find a way to pay for that as well. So, another things that, to help, so here's the incentives that areas like you all can help push and encourage building of affordable housing. So one of the things is allowing for more density. So, which means letting us build more units in a smaller space. Because the more, you know, the more units we have on the 1 acre, we paid the same for that 1 acre, but now we have more units that are collecting some rent. So that makes it a little bit, you know, that gives you some economies of scale. Another huge issue is parking requirements. So that's something, it costs about $25,000 a parking spot, if it's surface parked, if it's, maybe that's not exactly right, but it's somewhere in that range. And if you have to build, you know, if you have to build a podium or, you know, parking deck, that is significantly more expensive. So when local zoning requirements say that you have to have, you know, 1 parking spot for every unit or 2 parking spots for every unit, that is a significant cost to the development. So anything that reduces those costs, which was why Mercy Park was such a great location and a great project, is because we were able to get those parking requirements reduced because we're close to the MARTA station. So, but that, and that helps. So that helps reduce some of the costs there. So that's something that local municipalities can have an impact on in terms of helping incentivize builders to come. Other aspects that the government has control over would be their local impact fees. That is a big cost. That's the cost to tap into the sewer system, the cost for permits, all of those fees can add up real quick. And having incentives or breaks for nonprofits or for affordable housing builders can make a big difference in helping reduce those costs as well. Also, taxes obviously is a big piece, and while we're a nonprofit, there are some areas that do exemptions for nonprofit ownership. It doesn't start out that way for us as the way tax credit development works, but I won't go into that either. But so any kinds of tax breaks and for real estate taxes can help significantly reduce that operating cost. So what we have to pay, what our expenses are for the building. So if our rent is our income, and then, you know, what your monthly bills are, that helps reduce our monthly bill, which gives us more income, which would ultimately allow us to support more debt, which makes us be able to build the project, because we can come up with ways to finance it if our expenses are lower. That's just the sort of the basics. So the idea here is that if you want to have affordable housing in your area and you want to be able to support those low income folks, it's incumbent on the local governments and to provide that financing and to provide low income loans and other ways to help us finance the project. And we will come where those are. So if you put it out, that we will come here. And the other thing that local municipalities can do is to study the rules that the state puts out. It's called the QAP, and they identify all of the things that they are prioritizing, and they open it up to the public, and you can bring comments, and you can, you know, lobby the state and tell them, you know, we have this great piece of land here, and it's, you know, located in X, Y, and Z, close to this or that, and can you make that a priority and give points to that, because that's the first step for us, is finding the places that meet the requirements of that state document. Yeah.
Those parking prices, That's just the cost of building them. That doesn't include the opportunity costs of, for example, if you have to go devote space to parking, build fewer units. You're not including that in that.
No,
right?
no, that's just it's a great point, that's just the cost to build it, so, right, and then if we didn't have to build it, then you can build more units, right, so you can do that, yeah.
So one of the things I noticed was the government invested in your project, it's about $175,000 a unit. And we, the council and senior staff went to Asheville recently and participated in an exercise where they were identifying about $80,000 a unit is what they were having to invest to be able to get affordable housing units created. I'm curious what are you seeing as sort of the average in the Atlanta metro area? Does it become more expensive as you get closer to the city center? And can you tell us, why did you choose 50-60% AMI instead of 80% AMI, or, you know, which I think is more of a popular level? Can you speak back to this, Diane?
Right, I'm gonna take the second one first.
Yeah.
The 50 and 60% AMI, that's part of the tax credit program. So those are requirements, although that has recently changed, and then you will see some more of those 80% units because they now open it up to what they call income averaging, so that you can balance out, you can have some 80% units, and then you can have, the other thing that they're really trying to push is 30% AMI, because that's a population that's not being served at all. So that's a new program, and developers, it's a little complicated about how you do it and how it works and then how you administer it, and everybody's kind of still trying to figure out how to make that work, but you will be seeing more of that. But yeah, 60% and 50% AMI is your requirements for tax credit program. You can do it as a mix. You can have tax credits and market rate units. It's more difficult. It's just harder because the tax credits are only allowed to fund your low income units. They can only fund the 60% and 50% or 60% and below. So if you want to have a mix of income and you have some market rate units, well, that's great if your market is in, you know, Midtown and you have really high rents and that balances it out. But there are some places that market rate rents aren't necessarily even that different than the affordable rents. So I mean, there's a lot of variables to try to figure out how to make those numbers work. And then in terms of, remind me of the first question.
The first question was sort of like the public investment per unit that you're accounting for to achieve your ROI and make your operation work. Here it looks like it was $175,000 a unit. We've seen other areas that are showing 75 and 80, and I was just looking for since you're in this market, what you're seeing as the most common public investment amount that goes in to create these affordable housing units.
And are you talking public investment amount, like including the tax credits or like the soft subsidies?
Tax credits to me are federal taxpayer dollars. So
right.
What I'm talking about is across all ranges, the tax dollars being invested, the non-public investment.
Well, I mean, the variations, you know, between a Nashville or an Atlanta or whatever, I mean, a lot of it is land cost, so that's gonna be a huge factor. And just differences in, you know, just building costs from area to area. I don't fully understand why, you know, I mean, it's just your access to materials and labor and all of those things play into that. I think, so that variation and how the local areas, so how Georgia does, how they incentivize like the size of the developments. So we operate in Georgia, we also operate in South Carolina. So South Carolina really tries to push they're kind of behind they're a little bit behind, I would say, in the industry, because they still are pushing for larger units instead of going smaller, and what kind of materials they require. So projects in South Carolina have to be 50 units or less. So that really then changes the calculation in how, you know, division of how much money per unit goes into it, because the way the numbers work. So, I mean, it changes from area to area, really depending on just cost of land and that.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yes. Fine.
So
So, one of the things that opened my eyes to this whole process is when I was reading, you hear about competitive processing. Well, I think a lot of people have heard you say competitive processing. When you actually figure out what that actually means, that your project is going, you're competing against other projects for just a very limited number of slots. It's not like a homeowner going to a bank and qualifying for a loan. That's not as a limited resource. These are projects. We had a project in Chamblee here that went through the federal income tax process, and they've got other points for different things that they thought that they were going to get, and big Florida, that used to probably potentially a brownfield site, that kind of stuff, and then they got dinged by being too close to Mercy Care because they didn't want to have too many of those units. And when I was at GMA, I spoke to the lady about that. It was part of the program, I guess. She decides in Georgia for the points. I said, we develop your density ring around your transit, but then we have one near transit, so now we can't build another one. Is that what you're telling us? And she goes, well, the process changes, and sometimes. So I do like the fact that you said, you could petition the state and say, hey, put this property in, give it some points, so maybe that would attract somebody in there, and then that's the city doing something that maybe not cost our residents or actual city residents, tax dollars that come out of the federal program, which is a much bigger pool to play in. It's just the competitive process. I think people hear it, but I think it slips by.
It is a intense business. We're talking, and you say you got dinged, they may have lost 1 point.
Right.
So, and 1 point throws off the whole, and then you don't win. And you've already spent, you've already had to spend a lot of money to get into, before you even get awarded this tax credit. So it's a big risk that these developers have to put in, because they have to develop the plans, and they have to get an architect, and they have to do all these things, and then they submit it, and you may be out of luck, and you have to eat those costs. Yeah.
I think mine was in the same light. You mentioned it's incumbent on the local government to actually go ahead and try and facilitate that process. But proximity can hurt you, so it's not the only factor. So that's my question as well. But the only other thing I wanted to add is we've got the slide up there that talks about local government fees, and that's a pretty big number. And so since we are in Chamblee and we're talking about our comprehensive plan, I just wanted to point out to a lot of the folks here tonight that the vast majority of that money doesn't actually go to Chamblee. The vast majority of that is going to Cap County for water and sewer, for the impact fees and all of that. It's a very, very small portion that's actually charged by Chamblee, so I just wanted to make sure the folks in the room knew that.
And I want to circle back in terms of, DCA, Department of Community Affairs, is already starting with their listening sessions, which are open to the community, where they start talking about, they update their QAP, which is the scoring list, every year. So they're already starting those listening sessions, and they go around. I encourage, if you have thoughts about that, bring up those points. I give credit to DCA because they do listen, and they do take these things into account, because, the thing like the proximity, the concerns are, you don't want one cannibalizing the other, right? So, although in this day and age you think, well, that's not a problem, the demand is so high, it really shouldn't be an issue, but they need to hear from these constituents and not just the developers, because they think the developers are just coming, we're all just self-interested, we're just chasing points, and that's not
that's a local condition that they may not be considering, because like you said, not many places have an order to stop transit, so they're not really designing their program to, for that.
Right, well, they have, that category isn't just about transit, it's like you cannot be within a certain radius of any other project. That is a category that, where you get points if you are not within that, so, yeah.
I've been through the tax credit, the 9% competition. And I just want to give a general feedback, especially since we have the locations here. In the point scoring, the project being a part of a transformation is transforming communities. It's actually where you get quite a substantial amount of points. Okay, it's very important. So that means the development comes to the local community, work with the local leaders to help them transform that community, okay? Meaning using affordable housing as a strategic tool to transform, revitalize, whatever terms you want to use, that community. So I challenge you to think about that affordable housing in a very strategic way, okay, at the higher level. So they're looking to allocate. For example, if you saw health and housing, that during that year of competition, health and housing was a key initiative of how they choose. They gave points for the health and housing. Any project that has a health and housing initiative. Transformational communities is what they're driving right now. It's been in the recent years. So you have to have plans to revitalize, transform communities. Okay, that's one part. The other part is you have to think strategically of housing. You have a developer come in and say, we're looking at this 1, 2, or 3 acre property, and we can build 100 units on it. But it all sounds good, and maybe you wanted that 100 units to go up. But what happens, the tax credit process is that if you want that year, the points for that year, you may not be able to get something down a mile, 2 miles down the road from that for the next 2 or 3 years. Okay? So in some cases, it's better for you to have a master plan of more than, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then you attack it that way, rather than have one standalone and then another one standalone and try to win these things. Okay? There are a lot of things that are going on there that challenge the developers, of course, how these things built, but for the leaders, the local leaders and the local community to figure out how to really use it to their advantage. Okay? And the bottom line is think about it strategically. Okay? Putting up 50 units, 100 units sounds good and may help, but thinking longer term about it, have it as a key weapon for you to transform the community is actually that's what they want. That's what the whole intention of the program is, not just a standalone building.
And I think what you guys are doing here right now with this plan is the step in that process. But I encourage y'all to make sure you're consulting that document, because it's very prescriptive on exactly what needs to be in that plan in order for it to count as a redevelopment plan that counts towards transformation. I think I have one more, and then I think I'm supposed to pass off my time. Go ahead.
So, what is affordable here in Chamblee? What are those
numbers?
Yeah, numbers.
So I can say for Mercy Park, so it's 60% area median income and 50%. So those rents range from $550 to maybe $720, something like that. So that's what is for this area. I mean, but it can be a big range. I mean, you could have City of Atlanta, or it can go all the way up to 1,100 for a 2-bedroom or something.
So what is the AMI in this area?
74.4.
74.4.
For a family of 4.
Yeah.
So then the 80% is 80% of 74.4, and that's your income.
59.5.
Right.
Right.
Which then you have a certain percentage.
30%, right. 30 can't be more than 30% of that.
Just so everyone understands, when you say what is affordable, that's as defined by HUD. So not necessarily in all definitions of affordable for different people, but it's to qualify for the specific tax credit.
Right. And that standard is 30% of your income, no more than 30%.
Which begs the question for me, how dependent are you with regard to income on the facility for federal dollars, say from the Department of Housing and Urban Development for Section 8 money or voucher? Very dependent. So, okay. And this is a tax credit building. It does not have vouchers or other subsidy on it. But there are, particularly when you're trying to serve the lowest incomes, we're talking about people who may have no income. Right. Especially seniors, or they're on such a fixed income. I mean, that 30% might be, they can only afford $50 a month. Right. Right. So that it's very integrated with those programs. Okay, good. So a lot of layers. You gotta beg, borrow, and steal from a lot of different places to try to make it. That's great. That's the challenge.
Can I make one quick? Affordable housing nationwide. Nobody's building affordable housing without some sort of subsidy.
Executive Director of the Atlanta Land Trust. So you heard from Ronit about how you develop and finance rental affordable housing, and I'm going to tell you about how we're using the Community Land Trust model in Atlanta in order to produce affordable home ownership opportunities, so that you can evaluate whether the Community Land Trust model is a potentially good fit for you in Chamblee. So the mission of the Atlanta Land Trust is to create affordable housing that is permanently affordable, close to the Atlanta Beltline and elsewhere in the city of Atlanta. And I'm going to talk about how we create permanently affordable housing, because that's a key differentiator for our organization. And our vision is that we will be the primary community land trust in the city of Atlanta and the largest urban community land trust in the United States. So this community land trust model, I'm going to go through it in a little bit more detail exactly how it works, but this is not a new tool. It's been around for 50 years. And the first community land trust in the country was actually here in Georgia, in Albany, Georgia. So we're going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary of New Communities, Inc. this year. There are over 200 community land trusts across the country in cities large and small. So this is a very well-tested tool across the country in communities of all different types. In Atlanta, this is a relatively new tool. The Atlanta Land Trust was created in 2009. And initially we had a couple of units that were developed, but there was about a 5-year period where we didn't have any full-time staff. So I was hired about a year ago to essentially relaunch the organization and secure the resources necessary to achieve our vision and try and create as many permanently affordable homes as possible in the city. Again, with a focus around the Atlanta Beltline, because that's where we're seeing the greatest amount of displacement in Atlanta. So we really are facing an affordable housing crisis in the city of Atlanta. I'm not sure exactly what the situation is in Chamblee, but I know that certainly across the region, several communities are dealing with this issue. In Atlanta, of our 200,000 households that we have, 55% earn less than 80% of the area median income. So we were talking about what is affordable, who qualifies for affordable. The AMI, or area median income, is the measure that's used to determine affordability and who qualifies for certain programs on an annual basis by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So if you hear people talk about AMI, this is the measure, and it's done at a regional level. So both Chamblee and the city of Atlanta are going to have the same area median incomes that we're using to measure affordability. So of these 80% that are making, or of these households that are below 80% of area median income, 69% spend more than 30% of their housing, 30% of their income on housing. And that's a really important measure, because according to HUD, if you spend more than 30% of your income on housing, you are cost burdened and your housing is not affordable. So that really can apply to anybody. We want to create housing that is affordable for everybody. And everybody deserves to have housing that's affordable to them. So regardless of what your income is, you don't want to be spending more than 30% of it on your housing. And then affordable housing demand within the city is projected to increase about 10,000 units by 2027. So we're in a situation where we have growing demand for affordable housing that's being driven by a number of different factors, including stagnating wages, as Jonathon shared with us. We're losing affordable units on an annual basis because of expiration of low-income housing tax credit units, because of appreciation of property values. And it's a tough situation. We're just not producing enough affordable housing to meet the demand. And on an annual basis, we're losing about 1,500 units. So not only is the demand growing, but we're losing units every single year. So because we're facing this crisis situation, addressing the affordable housing issue really has become a key priority for Mayor Bottoms. She recently released this document, which is the One Atlanta Housing Affordability Action Plan. It's available on the City of Atlanta's website. There are 4 key goals that are outlined in this plan. 1, create or preserve 20,000 affordable units by 2027, I believe is the time frame. The second goal is to raise $1 billion in public and private funding in order to create and preserve those affordable units. 3, mitigate displacement in order to ensure that people are able to stay in their communities despite rising property values. And 4, allow for innovation and streamlining of processes related to developing affordable housing units. So the work that we're doing at the Atlanta Land Trust directly relates to the 3rd goal, which is, again, minimizing displacement and ensuring that people can stay in the city of Atlanta despite rising property values. So let me get into a little bit more detail about how a community land trust operates. Again, a community land trust is a nonprofit organization. It's a member-based organization that obtains and manages land for the benefit of the community. Of those 200 plus community land trusts across the country, a lot of them are doing things other than affordable housing. You can use community land trust to create and preserve green space, community amenities, affordable commercial space for local or small businesses, as well as affordable housing. The goal really is to get control of land and put that land into use for the benefit of the community, whatever the community needs. Our focus at the Atlanta Land Trust right now is affordable home ownership, but looking out into the future, we may expand our scope of work depending on what the community needs in Atlanta. So I do want to point out here, our community land trust is generally a membership-based organization. It's open to people that live within the geographic area of focus. Again, they acquire land, remove those lands from the market, and maintains ownership of the land and puts them to use for the community benefit. And then lastly, the trust component is really important, and this relates to the governance of the organization. We are managed by a tripartite board of directors, which means that there are 3 distinct groups represented on our board of directors. For us at the Atlanta Land Trust, it's nonprofit organizations, public and private sector stakeholders, and then members of the community. And those can be people that live within our geographic area of focus or people that live within the units that we're developing. So it's really important that you have community representation on the board of directors to guide your decision making based on, again, what the needs of the community are. And so this is how it works with a specific example of how somebody is buying a house. So again, our goal is to create affordable home ownership opportunities. And the homes that we're developing, we want them to be permanently affordable. So how do we do that? Again, we go out and acquire land. We can acquire land through a number of different means. We can accept donations. We can raise money to go out and buy the land, or we can enter into partnerships with public entities or nonprofit developers, for-profit developers who are developing affordable housing and they just want to place it into the land trust to ensure that it's permanently affordable. We have a lot of different partnership structures that we have in place right now that are allowing that to happen. And then once we have control of the land, we develop the affordable homes. We can do single-family homes, townhomes, condos. In some instances, we're buying homes and renovating them. In some instances, we're buying vacant land and building new construction. But we build the home and then we sell it to an income-qualified resident. Most of the people that we're working with right now are at or below 80% of the area median income. When we sell the home to them, they buy the house in fee, but we retain ownership of the land. And this is critical to creating the permanent affordability. We then enter into a long-term ground lease with the homeowner so that they have right to live on the land. But it's through our ownership of the land that we can do 2 things. 1, we can reduce the cost of the home because we remove land from the equation. And 2, we can control what happens on the land through the ground lease. Namely, we can control the price for which the home is sold every single time it's sold, and we can control the income of the buyer every single time it's sold. So every single time one of our homes is sold, they have to be sold to somebody who is earning less than 80% of the area median income at that point in time, and it's sold for a price in accordance with a formula that is set forth in the ground lease. So then the home is sold to somebody else that meets our income qualifications. They are able to earn a portion of the equity on the home. So our challenge is really balancing the long-term affordability that we're trying to create with creating wealth building opportunities for our residents. And that is a challenge. We seek to do that through our resale formula, allow people to realize some amount of equity, but not as much equity as they would realize if they were in a market rate home. Because if they were in a market rate home, then we wouldn't be creating permanent affordability. So it's kind of like when somebody buys into a community land trust home, they're getting an affordable home and they agree to pay that benefit forward to the next home buyer. So this is a process that then just repeats itself over and over and over again. And you see here, 58% of our homeowners will then go on to buy a home in the traditional real estate market. So we really see ourselves as a stepping stone to traditional home ownership, not a replacement for it, but it's a way that people who maybe have been renting their whole lives and have never had the financial capability to buy a home to get to that point, but they need kind of an interim step along the way. So the equity that they're able to realize through a community land trust home is typically enough for them to put a down payment on a market rate home at a later point in time. And so then, again, I mentioned our area, geographic area focus is the Atlanta Beltline. Everybody's familiar with the Atlanta Beltline. We're seeing tremendous property value appreciation around the Beltline. This is data from a study that was done by Dan Emmergluck at Georgia State University from 2011 to 2015. And it shows that there was tremendous appreciation in the city of Atlanta over that time frame, but those quadrants of the Beltline realized even greater appreciation than the rest of the city, from 17 to 28% greater than the rest of the city. And that was particularly pronounced in the southwest portion of the Beltline, where we are really focusing our efforts. And that trend has continued to play out over the past couple of years. From 2013 to 2018, you can see along the Beltline, again, particularly along the south and west portions of the project, property values went up, home sales prices went up over 200%. So we really want to make sure that we're honing in on those areas where home prices are going up, because that means property values are going to go up, and then people can no longer afford to stay in their homes or rent apartments because prices are going up faster than incomes are. And then this slide just shows where some of our activities taking place. These are the sub areas of the Beltline. The green shaded area is the planning area for the Atlanta Beltline. So that's really our focus. It's basically a half a mile to either side of the Beltline corridor. So in sub area 10, we have 26 units that we're working on. These are all single family homes, a mix of new construction and renovation, primarily in the neighborhoods of Vine City, English Avenue, and Washington Park. Sub-area 1 down here, this is just south of West End, if you're familiar with that part of town. In the Oakland City neighborhood, we have a new construction project we're working on with the development partner, where we'll develop 23 affordable homeownership units, a mix of condominiums and townhomes that will be modular construction. So it'll be the first modular constructed multifamily project in the city of Atlanta. And sub-area 2, we have 10 units. This is all in the Pittsburgh neighborhood, where the Annie E. Casey Foundation is really active. After the recession, in the middle of the recession, they went in and bought a bunch of property for very low prices, and have slowly been disposing of that property to nonprofits to develop affordable housing. And so we have, these homes are almost all complete and on the market right now. And sub-area 4, we have 3 units. This is in a condo building on the East Side Trail. And we're having a lot of conversations with other partners about projects throughout the city of Atlanta, and really are open to any approach to do this. Because we're so young, we aren't sure exactly what's going to be the most effective approach for us as an organization, where we can add the most value. So we're trying to test out lots of different approaches, lots of different partnerships to see what is most effective. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes?
So I have noticed where you guys are getting out in front of the active Beltline and getting out and trying to.
Not enough, yeah.
But that's where
That's the goal,
you're
yeah.
getting out in front of that, so when the Beltline comes through, you're already got property secured, because you're kind of meeting the trend or whatever.
Yeah, and actually, Oakland City is a great example. From, let's see, 2013 to 2018, property values in that area specifically increased 227%, but the vast majority of that increase happened from 2017 to 2018, which is the year that the West Side Trail opened. So that has an immediate, significant impact on property values. So in that area, we're almost too late. But the South Side Trail is along here, and this hasn't opened yet. It's an interim trail right now, but it hasn't been paved. So we have the opportunity to get in front of it in that area, I think.
And then, so you did mention that you're a nonprofit, so
Yes.
that's kind of key, because that's kind of a reoccurring thing we keep hearing for our arts program and our affordable housing program, is to get nonprofits involved in this, because there's just a limited amount in the city. What do you
Right.
see, do you see Chamblee being able to form a land trust, a nonprofit such as that to, I mean, not the city, but
Yeah.
you have to, and how much does Atlanta, the city of Atlanta, support you guys? What How much
to
funding do you think
support
we're-
us in theory, I guess. We're specifically identified in the mayor's affordable housing action plan, which is actually really powerful, but we get no funding from the city of Atlanta. But they have identified us as kind of a key partner to carry forward the goals that they have. What I would suggest for the city of Chamblee to consider is creating their own land trust that's affiliated with the city. There are lots of examples of that across the country where it is an agency or an entity of the city, and so the city can then invest resources in it. I don't know if a standalone community land trust in the city of Chamblee would be able to raise enough money to operate. But we also are hoping to get into the business of providing services for a fee. So it's also plausible that, you know, a couple years down the road, you want to create a land trust, you create a board of directors to do that, but you farm out all of the administration to the Atlanta Land Trust, because we'll have all of the infrastructure in place to do that.
You sure you guys just don't feel like expanding?
I think my board would not be supportive of that. We have had that conversation. Yes.
Why would a developer wanna work with you? It seems like that would cut into their profits if, you know, instead of making affordable housing, they just shoot for the sky and, you know.
Right. A developer is never gonna wanna work with us out of the goodness of their own heart. They're gonna wanna work with us if they're mandated to have affordable housing in their project.
And why would they be mandated? Is that, local
Inclusionary
government?
zoning, we have inclusionary zoning in the city of Atlanta, or, they could be receiving some sort of other incentive that requires them to provide affordable housing in exchange for that incentive.
Gotcha.
Then city bonus would be one.
And I'm hopeful that there will be a point in time where we can calculate some sort of value of donation so that the developer can then take that as a tax deduction, and that creates some sort of incentive for them, but we haven't figured that out quite yet. Yes.
In terms of fundraising, can you attract funds from, say, financial institutions, to buy the land and they somehow, get Community Reinvestment Act credit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who are some of the investors in the land?
Right, so we're really figuring that out in real time. I mentioned I'm coming up my 1 year anniversary, and at this point we are largely supported through grants from foundations, but it is not a sustainable business model for us to have. We need to have more earned income opportunities, but because we're a nonprofit, I don't really see there ever being a point in time in which we don't need funding support from foundations. We're working with a lot of banks in different ways. Banks typically have community development divisions as well as foundations. I want as much grant dollars as I can get because I don't have to pay those back. So that's working with the foundation side of the bank, which we've been successful with. But I also want to work with the community development division in order to get low-cost financing for my projects. So on the foundation side, I'm really looking for operational funding. And then on the community development side, funding to support the development projects.
You were mentioning something about reducing the value and over time depending on the economy. Can you speak a little further in depth on that? Would you be able to also raise the value as well?
The value of the home is going to be determined by the resale formula. So we're responsible for setting the initial sales price, which I do based on a formula that takes a lot of different variables into consideration. But my goal is to make sure that people that are buying our homes aren't spending more than 30% of their income on housing. And then so we set the initial sales price, and we try and be as conservative as possible because we want to make sure that that price allows for the home to be affordable upon resale. And again, we have a resale formula that will dictate that resale value, and there are 3 different approaches to resale formulas, and we'll get into the weeds really quick. But if you want more information, I can refer you to a lot of different sources that talk it through. But we basically use an appraisal-based formula. So somebody's able to share in a portion of the appreciation of their home, 25%, but not all of the appreciation.
So
I guess, would you still use that formula, say if the economy took a swing and values were not the same? So
it's really a difficult decision to pick the right formula. We can change the formula, but if we change the formula on a home and there's a homeowner in it, they have to consent to that change. So the best way to do it is to change the formula at the point of resale, so it affects the subsequent buyer, not the current buyer.
And lastly, what's the number of homes you have in your inventory?
So we have these 3 homes that you see in sub-area 4.
So that's.
Yeah, and then we have about 60 in our pipeline, but actively in our pipeline where we have commitments in place. And then, you know, we're having conversations on another 50 to 100.
I would like to work with you guys, cause I have a 50 home development just south of that.
Okay, I'll give you my card at the end of the presentation.
Are you paying market price for your property, or is something you're requiring from your property from maybe a donation,
Yeah.
saying, well, I want this to be?
That's the goal, to not acquire it for market value.
Because,
Yes.
you know, it's funny, because we have a lot of energy behind us, and everybody's really excited for property owners when they sell their house, their lot for a lot of money, and then they get really mad when they say the developer is making all the money. Well, the problem of unaffordability, or however you want to phrase it, started with the premium sale.
Right.
That, you know, because
Right.
you can't get started if you start, you know.
No, you're absolutely right.
For a quarter acre.
And we have had some
How affordable can it be?
success in working directly with homeowners who want to sell, and they wanna make sure that their home remains in good hands, that the neighborhood remains affordable. So sometimes you can have friendly homeowners that will sell it at a reasonable price, but we're also working with other nonprofit organizations, other foundations. We're working with our land bank authority in the city of Atlanta, so that should be a good resource for us to get very, very discounted property. If you all in Chamblee don't have a land bank authority, that's something else to consider.
Is that like a blighted, coming from the blighted property? Is that what
Yeah,
that's from?
the land bank authority is a public entity, and so they can take property that is tax delinquent or has other issues, clean it up, and then sell it for whatever purpose they deem necessary.
So from a banking perspective, I'll let you know that the United Community Bank has a CRA product that is a mortgage product for the homeowner, and they get 100% financing with no mortgage insurance premiums as long as their income meets your income criteria. We won't do it for land lease. We have a flex product for people that are owning Georgia Power Lakes.
Oh, yes,
It's called
That's
a
the
flex.
exception in Georgia,
But it's a 20% down payment product.
Right.
So our leadership might, because we have an area of expertise in 2 of the unique criteria that your challenge presents, we might be a good partner for you to have a conversation about the mortgage that the homeowner could possibly carry.
Do you all hold those mortgages on your portfolio?
We do.
Yeah, that would be a great conversation to
I'll
have.
give you my card when you
Okay.
leave. It's not me, but I'll be
Okay.
more than happy
Great.
to put you in touch with our product
Great,
creators.
yeah, we have 2 approved lenders we're working with right now, and they sell their mortgages to Fannie and Freddie. Fannie and Freddie will buy these mortgages with a land lease, but we can't do FHA or VA. And then a lot of other people just aren't willing to invest the time to understand how to underwrite it.
Right.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. Any other questions? Yeah.
And forgive my ignorance here, and this is a very basic question, but you keep talking about ground lease or land lease. Does that mean that your organization retains the ownership of the land?
Precisely.
Okay, and so really what the homeowner, the low-income homeowner is purchasing is the structure,
Correct.
not the land.
They get the structure, and then they get a leasehold interest in the property. Okay, great, thank you.
Let's give all our speakers one more round of applause. That's really helpful. I'm sure we can hang out for a few more minutes here if you have questions. But that does conclude our presentation tonight. Do make sure that you've had an opportunity to look at the boards and check the website, onechamblee.com, so you can see the draft plan when that's available.
Real quick before everyone heads out, we just have all their city